On the line with us now, the minority leader of House of Delegates of Virginia, David Toscano. Mr. Minority Leader, great to have you with us.
Great to be back, and I guess it's pretty scary that we're still in session, huh?
I mean, I was just thinking about that today when we thought about having you on. We're like, well, technically you're still in session, and it's the end of the summer. Football's about to start. You guys haven't wrapped things up. Okay, you've got a special session coming up on September 18th. And let me just, if I may, Leader Toscano, be candid. I mean, there's a lot of us in the media that think that the special session designed to have an authentic debate on Medicaid expansion is basically going through the motions, a sideshow that isn't going to amount to anything. And I think that was the genesis of your beef with Speaker Howell when you sent a letter to him basically saying, what's the plan, right?
Well, I did send a letter asking him what the plan was because, we'd like to know the rules of the game before we go into the special session to discuss Medicaid. They've said for a long time that they want a full and complete debate and a fair debate on Medicaid. But it's hard to know what you're debating without knowing the rules in advance. As you know, early in the session, that started in January, we heard from Republicans that they had some kind of plan to deal with the coverage gap, and we never saw one. Then we got into the budget debate, and the Republicans took the position, well, we got this budget out there. We're not going to muddy it up with our plans or any proposal about Medicaid expansion. So just wait, decouple the budget, pass the budget, and then we'll talk about Medicaid. Well, that finally happened. We never saw anything. And now we're almost into September, and we still haven't seen anything. So, a lot of people are pretty cynical out there about the prospects for really having a discussion that's going to lead to something. And I think some of us feel that, if you're just going to posture when you get down there and do nothing, why don't we just issue competing press releases from our places at home and save the taxpayer money from not going to Richmond?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think at the end of the day, don't you think it's fair to know what the rules are and what the objectives are? And have you gotten a response back from Speaker Howell's office?
I did get a response back, and that response was, we're not even going to think about rules until after Labor Day. And in fact, it was kind of an interesting response. I mean, technically speaking, a special session hasn't even been called yet. I mean, there was a press release issued in July from the Speaker's office saying that he intended to call us back on September 18th, but I think technically you have to have a formal issuance of the call, and I don't even think that's happened yet. So, there's a lot of confusion out there, and the public needs to know. The public has taken an active interest in this. They want to know how this is going to be debated. They want to know how they can comment on a number of initiatives that people might propose. Right now, they have no way of knowing how to comment. And it'd be good for the rules to be established so they know. That's the heart of our democratic process.
Look, I think that makes a lot of sense. And the fact of the matter is that Republican leadership in the House of Delegates and the state Senate in Virginia has said over and over that in this special session, there would be a legitimate debate about the issues of Medicaid expansion, what to do with the 400,000 people that are so-called in the coverage gap now, and how that would be resolved. And one of the things in media that we were really looking forward to is what I'm going to call an authentic debate of the issues. And one of the big items of getting this out of being decoupled with the budget to start with was so that we could have this session and have an authentic, legitimate debate without the specter of the government being shut down over it.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
So I'm looking forward to that, but I think what you're saying now is you're not sure how that's going to come into play based on what's been done now.
Well, I think that's true. I mean, if you look at what's happened really in the last, 6 months, study after study comes out talking about the economic benefits to states who accept Medicaid. The Robert Wood Johnson Foundation just came out with a study last week that showed of the states that accept Medicaid, they are getting a lot of their federal dollars back that they've been sending to Washington. They have been they've been reducing uncompensated care in their hospitals. They've been providing some additional monies for their hospitals so they can remain in good financial shape. And they've been placing more uninsured people on the rolls. And so you've got these studies out there that again and again and again show the economic value, independent of the human value, of getting more people covered and bridging this coverage gap. But yet we hear nothing from our colleagues about how they intend to help some of these 400,000 folks who don't have any coverage right now.
Leader Toscano, I want to get to special election District 48, Northern Virginia. I've got to be candid with you. Republicans are telling me they're going to win that race. What do you think?
Well, that's what people say a lot, but we've got a terrific candidate there, Rip Sullivan, and he's doing a terrific job as well. I think a number of folks in Arlington got a little bit spooked about a Republican winning a seat in that Board of Supervisors election, and I don't think the Democrats up there are taking anything for granted. Rip is working real hard. He understands what's at stake there. It's a Democratic performing district. We're reasonably confident that we're going to prevail there. And Republicans can say what they want to say. In the end, it's going to come down to the boots on the ground, who's going to turn out the vote. We think we've got a good operation there, and we're confident we're going to win.
Confidence always helps, no question. I'm confident that this is just me, Leader Toscano, but I'm confident that the Republicans are going to come back with something because they've told us and told me for months that if you decoupled the budget from Medicaid expansion, that there would be a legitimate and open debate. And I'm looking forward to that because I love debates. I'm in the debate business.
That's right? Exactly right.
I like debates.
That's right. You need to know something about what's going to be proposed so you can start talking about it.
We got to start talking about it because we love debates and we love to get ideas, and we don't always agree, but that's what our platform is. So I'm looking forward to that. Okay. The gift that keeps on giving for the media, as salacious as it is and disappointing for so many people. We cover the McDonald trial every day. The prosecution resting their case beyond the details that are very uncomfortable for many of us. What do you think?
Well, it's a tragedy. And it's been very interesting to see the defense strategy in this thing to basically, shall we say, decouple the McDonald's. I'm not sure that's going to win the day with the jury. And in fact, that could totally backfire. If the jury believes that there was a conspiracy of sorts between Maureen and Bob, and that the strategy was to try to essentially cover it up by making it look like their marriage was on the rocks and they really weren't getting along, if they believe that, it is not going to go well for the McDonald's. If they don't believe that and they decide that this is the kind of thing that most politicians do, which I totally disagree with, then you still got the bank fraud charges, which are pretty clear, and they've been proved pretty clearly, it seems to me. So my guess, at the very least, that he gets convicted on a couple of counts, even if he dodges some of the big ones. I was just not aware of all of the evidence of these texts going back between Miss McDonald and Johnny Williams, and between Bob McDonald and Johnny Williams. And I think the jury looks at that. It's going to start looking at that and say, "Well, gee, what is going on here?" A lot of the case is circumstantial, but if you wake up in the morning and you see snow on the ground, even though you might not have seen it fall, it snowed last night. And a lot of people are going to feel that way, I think, when they look at this in the jury room.
Well, you know what? It's interesting. I'm not a lawyer, you are, but in following this, just from a media perspective, and I was up there the opening week, and that was a big thing. It was like a three-ring circus. And the defense laid out their strategy and I guess their opening statement, which you would think is going to be the cornerstone of what they're trying to prove. And as you so succinctly pointed out, sir, the defense basically said The marriage was on the rocks. They really didn't talk to each other. They weren't with each other. So if you don't talk and you're not close, how can you collude, right? I mean, they spent the entire opening statement on that.
Exactly. And if the jury comes to feel that not only were they colluding, but they're colluding again, even in their defense, they're going to have a problem. But I don't know. I'm not sitting there in the jury room. I'm not hearing all the evidence as it's coming out.
Right.
And it could be they will believe that. And if so, there's a chance he will get off on some of these things.
I think right now, when the prosecution rested, I don't think if the trial ended today, the jury would believe that, because it was too much evidence of the McDonald's talking to each other, many phone calls and things like that. But my wife, the Fräulein, is convinced that Monday or Tuesday the defense is going to drop some major bombshell that they had in their pocket the entire time. I don't know what that is. But I'm not one to argue with her. She's always right, so I'll have to see how that plays out. 8:25. I don't know what the bombshell would be, but she seems to think there's going to be something there. But, you follow this trial, and those of us that know the governor, know the family, as we all do, so many of these details that came out, it's really a head-scratcher, from the amount of personal debt that they accumulated to just a lot of the nonsense that went on. It's almost shocking because those of us in the media that covered Bob McDonald, just kind of thought that he was pretty squeaky clean, and now you're getting the opposite of that. So I think it's just bad for the whole state, right?
Yeah, it's bad for the whole state. It gives us a very bad image in the rest of the country, and it is tragic for the McDonald's too. Most people who know these folks like him, and Bob McDonald's a pretty earnest guy, and for him to get stuck in this and caught in this is a tragedy. But you look at the evidence and you say, you got to really scratch your head. Yeah. What must have these folks have been thinking?
Right.
Just so much of it.
Right. What were they thinking?
Yeah.
And even with the debt, they made a big deal. I think their credit card debt was $90,000, but the way I looked at that is, okay, so you pay the minimum. As soon as a guy gets out, he's going to get a major income job in Washington with some lobbying firm. He'll be able to pay that off in 60 days or 90 days or something. So even that, I didn't see where that was such a big deal. But, obviously it almost seemed like it became too easy. Ever have something that you ask for something and it's too easy, and so you just keep asking because it's just easy? And I almost feel like they got caught up in that.
Well, you can imagine the prosecutor's closing argument where they say, well, how many of us have had a lot of debt, and how many of us have had financial problems, but we don't falsify our bank records in order to get a loan, and we don't try to lean on people to provide a quid pro quo in exchange for money that we don't presently have. And, that kind of thing where somehow the jurors begin to see themselves very different than the McDonald's may lead the McDonald's to experience real problems in that jury room.
I think so. That could happen. Final question for Minority Leader David Toscano of the House of Delegates of Virginia from Charlottesville. I got 2 minutes. Virginia schools are going to be opening in several weeks across the state. There's about 20,000 or so illegals that'll be going into the schools that no one has any documentation for. Is that a problem?
Well, it's a huge political problem. People are stirring this up. But it's a huge problem for the kids. Our kids are coming from, a lot of these kids are coming from countries that are among the most violent in the world. Take a place like Honduras. It has a murder rate, I don't know how many times that of the United States. And, you've got to figure out a way to help these kids. And if you can get them back with their families, great, but it may be very difficult. So you've got this issue here that it's going to cost localities some money. But, we're the greatest country in the world, and we have a degree of humaneness that a lot of countries don't. And when it comes to children, we try to figure out a way to protect children from wherever they come.
All right, that is going to be the final word. Minority Leader of the House of Delegates of Virginia, David Toscano, with us. And